name is Jessica Maxwell. I'm a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated North Manhattan Alumnae Chapter, affectionately known as NMAC. Delta Sigma Theta was founded to promote academic excellence, to provide scholarships, and to support underserved communities. We work to educate and stimulate participation in the establishment of public policy and highlight issues and provide solutions for problems in our communities. NMAC was chartered 38 years ago in 1980 by 38 sorority members desired to impact change right here in the North Harlem, Inwood, and Washington Heights sections of Manhattan. In keeping with our chapter motto, innovative programming with far-reaching impact, we strive to enhance the lives of those residing within our catchment area. We do so through our 5-point programmatic trust, focusing on economic development, educational awareness and development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, and political awareness and involvement. Today's event is hosted by the Social Action Committee of the North Manhattan chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated under the leadership of our chapter president, Sora Sonia Tennell, and our 2 committee co-chairs, Sora Sharima Abel and Eleanor Qualu. We hope to provide you with the information and knowledge to combat trafficking right here in your neighborhood. We have an amazing panel and presentation discussion today to really help you identify what human trafficking looks like here in your neighborhood and how you can take action locally here in your neighborhood, but also nationally through public policy. I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Semhar Araya. Ms. Araya is a recognized practitioner, organizer, and thought leader on the diaspora engagement, African affairs, women's leadership, and international development. She currently serves as UNICEF's USA's Managing Director for Diaspora and Multicultural Partnerships. Semhar partners with leading diaspora influencers, organizations, and communities to support the most vulnerable children. Semhar is also the founder of Semi Consulting, a firm focused on supporting diasporas in development. Before Ms. Araya joins us to lead the panel discussion today, I have the immense pleasure of inviting up Sora Jones, who will share her personal story on advocacy on behalf of her daughter who was trafficked. Ms. Jones is a member of the Mayor's Task Force, Traffic Free New York, and she recently completed an interview with the New York Post, a story which you'll all be able to view next week. Please join me in welcoming Sora Jones.
Really having like an aha moment right now because my entire team that helped my daughter, literally rescue my daughter. We have Detective, I owe so much to this team. We have Detective Gloria here, who actually helped her apprehend the pimp. We have the district attorney rep that's actually handling my daughter's criminal case against the pimp. And we have my leader who helped me to bring awareness to the community, to actually speak about it. This is my 13th speaking engagement since it all happened last year. So I just want to say I'm really having a serious moment right now because I have all my sorors here and I have the people that are helping to stabilize my family again and to bring some justice. So I just want to give them a So before I tell a little bit about my story, I'm not going to get into too much because you have a huge wonder. I mean, you have the best panelists in New York City right here that's going to give you a lot of education. But when I speak directly to the parents, right? So I was just like you. I had my kids in all the great activities, swimming, dancing, YMCA sleepaway camp, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, every little program. I actually have twins, so I have a boy and a girl. So I had to keep both sexes engaged pretty much throughout their whole life. And so, you know, there's different changes in kids at different times, right? So you have some children that tend to do well with groups of friends, and then you have some kids that are sort of like loners. And so my daughter was a little different because she actually was in special ed, but she still was thriving with other kids. But academically, she just wasn't able to keep up with a lot of her peers. But she never really knew that she was in special ed until we actually walked into the special ed office on 125th Street, and her twin brother said, "Mommy, she's in special ed," because there was a special ed sign. So, you know, when you label kids, sometimes that's when they know that they do have some differences. When you don't label, then everyone is treated the same. So that's sort of the moral there. But just like you, parents and mothers and fathers, I gave my kids unconditional love. And then, of course, they get into the teenage years, and things change in their lives, and we start feeling a little anxieties and depression, and maybe we're not as competitive as twin brothers or friends or siblings. And so she was really at a low period where she really felt that her twin brother was leaving her, going off to college, which he did. He's at Morehouse now. And that she really was different from everyone else. And I could imagine her feeling that way because all her other life she was kind of included. So as she began to feel this way, she started to like kind of distance herself from some of her regular activities. And even though in her age group, a lot of the activities, you know, when you get 16 to 17, a lot of the activities you start getting aged out. So you don't have as many dance classes on the schedule on a Saturday when you're 17. And so I had started putting her in mentoring classes, like things to build the self-esteem up. And one evening, she went out the house. You know, we probably realized maybe a little bit after she had walked out that she was pretty much out. And so that's when she actually met one of the pimps. But she had met several of the people that were involved in sex trafficking, actually right on 125th Street, because in some of the storefront jewelry stores, you know, you see them, when you go all the way in the back of the store, there are tattoo and piercing rooms. And in those tattoo and piercing rooms, there are a lot of there's crime going on. And that's where I remember her saying to me that she was in a car with some men and they were talking about having girls working in different states. And she said Baltimore and Atlanta. And I said, wait a minute, you know, you don't need to be around these people. And so that was really her first interaction. But unlike other recruitment activities, sex trafficking is really a different beast. Because it's not the monster, moms and dads. It's not the monster, it's the neighbor. It's your girlfriend's cousin and the girlfriend's brother, and you don't even know that literally they are recruiting your kid. Literally. They're using their children to recruit your kids, or they're using other family members to recruit your kids. And they recruit different kinds of ways. They recruit by what we call in sales, if anybody's worked in sales, customer relationship building. And you say, hey, do you want that sweater? Well, you know, when you're ready to buy that sweater, just come see me. You know, no stress in the sales right now. We're going to build this relationship. And that's exactly what they do. They literally build the relationship with your child without you knowing, whether it's on the internet or in school, or they met them at McDonald's. Right now on 125th Street, or any McDonald's even up here on 69th or 70th Street, there are probably trafficker recruiters in that McDonald's right now, sitting at the tables, just watching the kids as they come in. They're recruiting in the malls. They're recruiting in Girl Scouts. They're recruiting anywhere that there are children, okay? So it's not like there's some sort of recruitment party, even though there are recruitment parties going on. Trust me when I tell you, they actually have recruitment periods where they recruit like right around the holidays. They have recruitment parties where they literally go out in a more aggressive way to recruit these young girls. So here she engaged in meeting this person right in our neighborhood, and he actually kidnapped her for 6 days. And that was just last year, so we're still processing everything. And the thing about it is that all I could do is hold on to my faith, to God, and to my family and to my friends. You really don't have that many people you could even call or tell that this is going on, so I didn't talk about it much because I was trying to talk to Detective Gloria and trying to figure out how we can save her and get her back. And the other thing, moms and dads, before you even realize that your child's being taken away, of course, the first thing you do is you call the local police, right? Right? So they come to your house, and even if your child's missing or they ran away, depending on their age, you know, you may see a more aggressive or assertive investigation, but the police were not really that helpful. And this is no offense to Detective Gloria, because she knows I talk about this everywhere I go. When the police came, you know what they told me? Oh, well, she's probably on social media with one of her friends. And I said, no, she only has 20 friends. She's not Facebook famous, as we say with, you know, younger people that have 4,000 friends. And so they said, oh, well, you know, call one of her friends up. I bet you they'll find her. And I said, no, officer, we are looking for her right now. All her friends are looking for her. We know her friends. These people that have her, they're not her friends. So ACS came in my house. They did the same thing. Mom, you're doing a great job. I had worked for ACS. They said, you have all the resources, but they still didn't help me. Adult Protective Services came in when she turned 18, and they said, she's 18. Mom, I don't really, so they didn't help me either. So you have to take the matters in your own hand. You have to know maybe where your kid may be, but you really don't know, because this is not something of the normal, right? When they kidnapped her again on Christmas Day, I knew, what child doesn't want to be home for Christmas? Something is wrong. So, you know, again, this sex trafficking is something that we can't even share amongst each other, because we don't even know. And that's why I commend my sorors today, because this awareness today is so crucial. What each one of you are going to hear from these because I've heard them speak, I often go to speaking engagements with them, is that it's going to change your life. You're not going to believe the things that you're going to hear from these panel of experts, because this is something that we've never known before, because it's done in a secretive way. They take the girls into apartments, into houses. And so how do you know who's behind the door? You don't know. When I asked someone in the neighborhood, when I found her in front of a building in my community, I said, did anybody know? And they said, well, we kind of saw a lot of traffic going in and out. So it's up to us to do more. I'm a part of Not On My Watch. Reverend Q is going to talk about the organization. We are asking for more volunteers. I'm the Manhattan director. Look out for the article. I'm around. I love you all, and I just want to say thank you for coming today.
Greetings, I'm Michelle Booker. I am Congressman Esbiot's Deputy District Director. And he would like to just share his appreciation for all the work that North Manhattan Alumni Chapter does in his catchment area. You've been doing it for such a tremendous long time. This is a really important issue. And his ear is to the ground with all sorts of issues affecting women and children abroad. And I just wanted to let you know that unfortunately, there are over 17,500 yearly victims of trafficking. And alone, there are almost 7,500 cases reported every year. So this is a really, really important topic. And again, thank you for having this forum.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you? We're going to get started. We're going to participate. It's a lot of participation today. So somebody tell me, what do you see on that screen? Kids hanging out, students, anybody else? Happy students. Anyone else? Nothing else? All right, that's good, no problem. There are 4 types of human trafficking. Essentially, the 4 types of human trafficking are forced labor, it's child exploitation, and sex exploitation. Sex exploitation, or child exploitation, you really could think of lives in both worlds. So it lives in labor trafficking, and it lives in sex trafficking. There's also organ removal. I can tell you I've never heard of an organ removal case, all right? So now, somebody's asking, who is this guy standing up here? Who's thinking that? Somebody raise your hand. Right, somebody's right. So, my name is Lieutenant Christopher Sharp. I'm from the Detective Bureau, the Vice Enforcement Division, and I'm the commanding officer of the Human Trafficking. So now somebody's thinking, why didn't he start off that way, introducing himself first, right? Somebody raise your hand. Somebody is thinking that, right? Why did I do that? The answer is because I'm the CEO of the team, and I can tell you that trafficking cases do not work in an orderly fashion, right? So if I do a presentation and I do it in an orderly fashion, what do you think? You think it comes in, we get a simple case, someone says this, someone did this to me, we go out and find them, and at the end of the 60-minute hour, we've arrested them and they're in jail for the rest of their lives. Human trafficking cases work just the opposite. They come in as a domestic, they come in as a missing person, they come in as a problem with a kid in school, they come in many different ways. So it's a difficult thing to combat, and it's a difficult case to prove, right? As well as to get a prosecution and then get a conviction. So why do I do this out of order? Because this is the world we live in, right? So, like I said, I'm the commanding officer of the team. We have a citywide unit. Detective Gloria Chavez at the end of the table is my #1 detective. We have a 9-person team, and we have a sergeant and myself as a lieutenant. I do not think of myself as a lieutenant. I am a lieutenant sergeant detective. If you are into sports and you think of football, there's a huddle right before the play, right? There are 11 people on the field in a huddle. I am one of the people in the huddle. You don't know whether I'm a quarterback, you don't know whether I'm a running back, I'm a receiver, I'm a lineman. I am whatever needs to be done on that specific day. In fact, 2 days ago, Gloria and I were in the 4-3 precinct, and I was doing an interview with Gloria. We had another detective arrive, and I step out, and they take over, because they're the experts, all right? But that's the best way to approach it, because what we have is an underreported crime, right? Dark figure, right? So everybody understands and recognizes this is an iceberg, correct? Well, we ran 456 cases, 256 cases last year. Some of those cases have multiple victims. So sometimes you may have 2 to 3 victims in one case, but at best we have about 400 victims, right? That's what we have reported. What is really going on is everything below, all right? And I'll show you a graphic a little bit later on that'll explain to you why I say it's an underreported crime. And the 400 cases we did last year, and even though we were very good with the 400 cases we have, we're not even at the tip of the iceberg. We only have the tip of the iceberg. So, if you want to know where we get cases from, we get cases from patrol. We get cases from detective squads. We get cases from special victims. We get cases from ACS. We get cases from our own internal departments. We get cases from the FBI. Homeland Security, self-initiated cases. That's one of my detectives. If he saw that he was in the presentation, you recognize him, he'd be very embarrassed. Gloria's picture will be up there next. All right? Australian Federal Police Department. We got a case from them. Let me explain to you how this works. This is Intel. Intel is part of the NYPD. They are their own division and own bureau. The Australian Federal Police Department has a girl, 16 years old, turning 17, who goes missing. She runs away from Australia. Where does she come? She comes to America, right? Essentially what happens is she had been planning it for a year. She had been planning on running away. Even she had an entire plan. She put her chip to her smartphone and she mailed it so that no one could track her. Her parents and the police department could not track her, all right? So she lands in LAX and suddenly someone comes and meets her at LAX and they drive across country. So the Australian Federal Police Department notifies us on a Monday. I think we rescued her by a Saturday because it took us 5 days. We were sitting on his house for 5 days. They were driving across country together, right? And he was grooming her. He was grooming her. And we got them probably on that Saturday, all right? And last is NGOs. Polaris is an NGO. That's called the non-governmental organization. We have non-governmental organizations that come together and they put resources together to do different things around human trafficking. Polaris basically has an entire network that does analyst work. They look into massage businesses, sex trafficking, and they send us tips, which we investigate. And of course, the district attorney's offices. We also get cases from them. So sex trafficking is in New York. It's brothels. It is massage parlors. It is traditional tracks. It is these dollar dance clubs in Queens. It's usually in Queens, most of them are, on the Roosevelt Avenue strip. So it's a dollar dance. No, you just said dollar dance. It's not really a dollar dance. It's something else, right? But it starts out as dollar dance des nudes. All right? Somebody tell me what that is. Somebody said it. Somebody said apartment. Who said apartment? It's an apartment, right? It's your residence. It's your residence. It's your neighbors, right? It's hotels, right? And I did a presentation for the Hotel Association in New York. So I picked this hotel somewhere in like the Middle East so nobody got offended. You picked my hotel. right? And it's this. This is the worst thing. Does anybody know what that is? Backpage. People that know what Backpage is, freaks, right? Backpage. Let me explain to you what Backpage is. Does anybody remember the Village Voice, right? The older crowd? Okay, so from 100 years ago, everybody that's my age, 100 years ago, there was a newspaper called the Village Voice. The Village Voice was very good at one thing. The first 25 pages gave you something that you might call news, right? The other last 125 pages gave you something else. Sex ads, right? Well, that's Backpage. So Backpage is like Craigslist, right? Everybody's bought something on Craigslist. You bought an RV, you bought a TV, you buy this, you buy that, right? Well, Craigslist does some of this too, but Backpage does this tremendously, right? Probably 80 to 90% of their ads are for this. Sex, prostitution, right? So much so, on one Sunday evening, because I'm a loser, at 6 p.m., I go and I count how many ads are there in Brooklyn on a Sunday at 6 p.m. There are 400 ads on a Sunday. 400 ads on a Sunday, right? Multiply that by 5 boroughs, we have 2,000 ads per day. Remember the previous graphic that I told you about, right? Tip of the iceberg? How many cases did I say I had last year? 256, right? If there are 2,000 ads for prostitution per day, how do we keep up with just 256 cases? Underreported, right? We are doing the best we can, but there's a lot of business out there. And the problem with the internet, it makes it anonymous, right? Yeah. So on June 6, 2007, because essentially the sex trafficking laws in New York are babies. Everybody has kids. How old are you? You're about 10 or 11? How old are you? 10 or 11, right? What year were you born? Oh, you and trafficking laws are the same age, right? What does that mean? The laws are very young, right? People get them wrong. Does anybody know who the governor was in 2007? Client number 9, all right? Client number 9, right? So, right, sometimes some of the laws are a little, right? Some of the laws have a problem, right? When you have a law which you first initiate, right, you get it wrong sometimes because you don't know what to recognize, what to look for, right? On the federal level, the feds have it good. They have this thing like third party. For the initial contact with the victim can tell me the story. I can go forward and on the Fed level, and I can say, hey, listen, I was informed by. Doesn't the Manhattan District Attorney wish we had that, right, in certain cases, right? Right. We need the victim to come in and cooperate. And the problem with victims as survivors sometimes, right? But right, you survive after, right? But the problem with initially is that they have a lot of other things going on, right? They have a lot of other things. And sometimes the criminal case is the last thing they need to be concerned about, right? If in our office, if you think of us as a United Police Department, probably when I wore a uniform, when I did other things in the police department, I was probably 80% police work, 20% social work. Gloria and I are probably 50% social work, 50% police work, right? We lose cases all the time because the victim is not ready, and I'm good with that. I'm good with that. If we can't get a criminal case, right, let's get them counseling, let's get them everything else they need, and let's get back to it later if we can, all right? Or let's go data diving, get phones, evidence, and let's see if we can get another victim through other types of evidence. And Manhattan District Attorney's Office is very good at that, all right? But essentially, sex trafficking in the penal code, a person is guilty of sex trafficking for 3 things, all right? Force, fraud, or coercion. Force is pretty self-evident, right? I tell Miss Abel, you're gonna go out and work on the track today. She says no, I punch her in the face, what does she do? She tells me no again, I hit her again, and then she goes the second time, right? That's the way it works, all right? Fraud. Fraud is, my mother's not from here, my mother's from Trinidad, right? So my mother, somebody says, Norva, you're gonna come to America, and we're gonna get you this great job. You're gonna be a manager at a hotel. You're gonna be a photographer, right? When Norva gets here, guess what? She's not a photographer, she's not a manager at the hotel. You're working that track, and you're gonna be answering this phone, right? Fraud, all right? And coercion. Let's go back to the first, right? I'm telling you you're gonna go work out on the track, you tell me no. I tell you I know where all your family lives, and if you don't want something to happen to one of them, right, you're gonna go work. You go work. Understand? So it's 3 basic things, right? But it also has other things around it. So if you give someone, if he or she intentionally, so a person is guilty of sex trafficking, force, fraud, or coercion. If he or she intentionally advances or profits from prostitution by supplying the victim with drugs, lying to them, taking their identification, you owe me, all right? Basically what I do is I kind of recap, right? So it doesn't say in the penal code, you owe me, but that's basically what it means. Physically force or detain you. Threat in combination with number 3, blackmail, testify or / provide or withhold testimony and info, and I'll kind of give an explanation for that one, because that one usually kind of confuses everybody. Public servant, anybody know any public servants in the room? Gloria. If Gloria does sex trafficking, she's a public servant, Gloria's going to jail, not me. All right? Oh, did I miss something up? Oh, there we go. And miscellaneous. All right? But let's talk about number 8. The way I like to explain number 8, the best way I know how to explain it is, Gloria's my pimp. Gloria tells me, Chris, you're going to go out and work. Right? I say, no, I'm not going to go out and work. I refuse. Right? Gloria throws me a beating. Really bad. So much so, I call the police. And I tell them, Gloria beat me up because she's my pimp and she wants me to go out on the street and work. And you know what? I have a witness. You can ask Jessica. Jessica saw everything. Well, who do you think Gloria and Jessica are? Who do they hang out with? Right? Who do pimps hang out with? More pimps. So guess what Jessica's in the business of, right? So Jessica says, you know what, Chris, I'm going to be your witness, and I'll testify and I'll help you. But guess what you now do? You now work for me, right? So everybody understand when I explain it that way, right? Testify, withhold, right? I'll testify against her. You now work for me. So recognize the signs. What is the victim experiencing? And I'm going to explain one thing about this because I do a lot of these and people talk about survivor, victim, right? I'm a police officer, right? On our reports, it says victim. For the last 13 years that I've been a police officer, it's victim. It's not that I'm not saying that the person, once they get through on the other side, is not a survivor, right? I'm not about the labels, I'm just telling you what the paperwork says. All right? So that's the why I use victim, but don't be offended by that because yes, when you get out on the other side, if you're living 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you are a survivor. You're trying your best to survive, all right? So what are the signs? You can have victims that experience coercion and threats, intimidation. They can suffer from emotional abuse. You mentioned isolation, right? Denying, blaming, minimizing. What is that? Oh, it's not so bad. He's not this, he's not that. And when I talk about these things, I'm not using gender bias, but I can tell you 98% of the cases, 99.5% of our cases are young women being trafficked, right? About 85% of our cases, the trafficker is a man, all right? There are women victims, all right? So sexual abuse, physical abuse, using privilege, economic abuse, all right? Those are all signs. Now, does that mean every victim has all of those? No. Victim could have one of those, but those are the repetitive signs that we see in our victims, all right? So if this works, let's see.
You never realize how much power you have. How much power you have until you're just totally broken and you have nothing left to give. And then it's just like this little flicker within that just, it empowers you. And once it empowers your thought, it can't help but change your reality. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with both parents up until adolescence, is when they divorced. Had tons of friends, big tomboy, climbed trees and stopped signs, and I've always been an A student in school. It was a pretty easy, normal childhood up until the point of divorce. It was actually on one of my first jobs where I met my trafficker. I was 16 going on 17, working as a hostess and learning to serve. And he was a very suave, very well put together, charming man who happened to be 30.
What's been so critical in Georgia's system is it really being victim and survivor focused. We need to first acknowledge that these are in fact victims, and we need to train our law enforcement to ensure that they know how to identify and conduct investigations and connect the victims to services. And we need to provide our prosecutors with tools so that they can effectively prosecute these cases. And then we need to create a very holistic mental health service delivery system.
I think we need to recognize that in the day-to-day press of juvenile delinquency cases in a typical juvenile justice system, you can't in a 5-minute court hearing figure out how to respond to these cases in an effective way. And that's why system players typically fall back on what's available to them. And what's available to them is a detention center where at least they think that the kids are kept away from the streets or kept away from their pimps. It is not a solution, however. It's the illusion of a solution.
Being arrested over and over again did nothing, absolutely nothing. But going through gyms gave me the knowledge and gave me the truths of what I was doing, things that I didn't even see within myself. And that was more beneficial, and those types of programs are more beneficial than doing these arrests because it just makes these girls angry.
So that is Katrina Owens. We actually did a presentation on hotels about 2 months ago when we met her at the hotel. ECPAT is an NGO, which I have on top, right? Non-governmental organization, but they're based on trying to end prostitution and child trafficking. You can see that on YouTube. I asked them permission to show her story. That's a 2-minute clip. But she has like a 21-minute story online. So I'm going to show you 3 graphics. Let's talk about 3 things. I'm a magician, right? I've been talking to you really. My presentation really doesn't have to do about sex trafficking or human trafficking. What it really has to do is about perception, right? It's about perception. What do you perceive? What do you think you're seeing, right? That's why we talk about like domestic violence, right? It's a domestic violence case. It's not a domestic violence case. It's actually pimp and prostitution, right? It's what you think you see, but it's not what, it's something else, right? So when you listen to this, you have to talk about and think about, well, what, have I ever seen this before? What am I perceiving? What is the victim? What is my daughter telling me? What am I missing? What are the clues? What are the signs, right? So Ms. Jones talked about basically where are the hubs of sex trafficking, right? So New York is a hub of sex trafficking, right? Don't pay attention to this graphic because this is the FBI statistics on how much money. And I don't know how you talk about legal prostitution versus illegal prostitution and how much it's worth. But I can tell you to pay attention to these 2 graphics, right? At the bottom it says that an average, a pimp can have up to 4 to 6 girls. That is most of our cases. That is most of our cases. Essentially what happens is we get in. By the time we get in, our victims are telling us there was 2 other girls here before me. There was another girl that's still there. That I left, but there were 3 other girls. There's another girl that recruits and brings other people in, right? That is the world we live in all the time. 4 to 6 is I would say, is on accurate. This bottom graphic says 1/3 of teens lured out on the street will be in prostitution within 48 hours. How many of us remember when we were 16? I briefly remember it, right? How many skill sets did you have? What could you do at 16? If you were like me, you couldn't do anything. You could eat for free, live for free, right? Half go to school, right? That's what you could do. Kids that are out on the street within 48 hours have no skill sets, right? So they go into an immediate mode of what's called survival sex, right? There's somebody looking for them to exploit them because that's what they know and that's the only thing they know how to do, all right? So this graphic on top, the young girls, right? And this is disturbing, I know, with the feet, right? It's meant to be that way. The average age for most of our victims in most of our cases is 16 to 17. The entry age is 13 years old, right? So by the time we get a 16-year-old cert cases, we're too late, right? So much so that we are now, as of April 2nd through April 6th, we will be training 5,000 school safety officers, right? So, because the school safety officers are people that have the daily interaction with them, right? Like, like we think they're nutty, like cops, oh, they're nutty, they don't know what they're doing. They spend just as much time in certain cases as you do awake with your child, right? Because by the time you get home from school, they get home from work, you get home from school, you guys are maybe up 5 hours together and then everybody's in bed. And then 6 a.m. the clock starts again, right? So that's why we're going to emphasize the training. And then this is to represent the LGBTQ community. The LGBTQ community, right? Whatever your social perceptions are about what are accepting them, not accepting them, that's your own personal business. But 75% of the LGBT community that runs away from home will be engaging in survival sex within 48 hours, right? So if you think, well, a 13-year-old is in trouble, well, a 13-year-old that identifies as lesbian or gay, 75%, they'll be in trouble quicker, all right? What is the real face of prostitution? That's the real face of prostitution, that young lady. That's over a span of 2 years. So what do sex traffickers look like? They look like this, they look like this, they look like this, and they look like this. So what do sex traffickers look like? They look like anyone. So there is no pattern. The days where the guy wore the fur coat with the rim hat and walked down the street with a cane, it's over. It's over. Or if not, I wish we had all of those guys because I catch them on all about 5 minutes. So the big revolving wheel, what is this about? Well, they say prostitution and sex trafficking will outsell guns and drugs. All right? Why? I have a gun on my back. How many times can I sell this gun on the street? Everybody agrees once? Right. How many times can I sell a bag of heroin? Once. How many times can I sell a 13-year-old that I leave in a hotel room with a cell phone and some McDonald's? Right? We had a rescue victim that we rescued, 27 years old, right? And she did 9, 10 dates every day for 7 years for one guy. Right? 27 years old. So a lot of what I've talked to you about is reactive, right? Well, I'm glad to tell you we went proactive, right? So on February 1st, 2017, last year, we initiated a NYPD hotline trafficking number, 646-610-7272. It's in your folders, it was handed out. We have additional cards if you need them, right? So if you think you have a tip, right? Rather than just call 911, report it to that officer, right? Who I can tell you is going to be somewhat overwhelmed because they don't know. It's not that they don't want to help you, it's that they're ignorant, right? And I can tell you, I didn't come on this job, well, let me say it this way. I came on this job at 36 years old. I worked in corporate America for 15 years prior to becoming on this job. I can tell you I was a cop in the 4-7 precinct, and at 36 years old, I would say I was an educated person. I had good sense about me, right? And I stood on corners, and I did not know. Did not know, no clue, right? So I can guarantee you, some of the uniformed officers that roll up to you have no clue. Have no clue. So when you're telling them these stories, they're not going to get it because their perception, right, is not where it needs to be. They don't understand. We're also in discussion this year of modifying the 646 number to a text application because what we know with victims is they may not have the time to pick up the phone and call and give details to the person on the other side, right? But they might be able to send a text, delete it, right? Send another text, GPS location, delete it. So we're working on that, all right? I have also to report, there's a national human trafficking hotline, right? So you can also call that, right? And when I told you how do I get cases, you call that hotline number, it'll come to me, all right? But it just takes more time. That's what it does. So as I told you, we're doing a lot more training. I personally train all our police officers, our sergeants, our lieutenants. We talk to them about domestic incidences, assaults, and fights that you think it's a domestic incident? 2 minutes. It's a domestic incident? It's not. It's not a domestic incident. It's something else. We talk about vehicular stops. You stop somebody in a car, right? And there's a young woman in the back and they're young guys and they tell you they're looking for a hotel, they're not from the neighborhood, right? You're in the Bronx, your license says the Bronx, what do you mean you're looking for a hotel and you're not from the neighborhood? Who is she? Who are you to her, right? Which we have had, right? School safety, I told you we're training all the school safety agents. Group homes, we educate. You have girls that go missing from a group home. Same girls all the time. One girl seems to be like Chris takes Gloria, Jessica, every week. Then she takes another 2. Chris takes somebody else. That's a sign. That's a warning sign. All right? Precincts where there are hotel motels, right? We know where we have, right, trafficking and we have prostitution, right? We're also doing a roll call training video. So we're doing a 5 to 7 minute video for all the older officers who are done coming through the police academy. And as I said, in 2018, we're going to be training 5,000 school safety agents. So what can we, not just I do, if you ask? Human trafficking, you can learn the indicators of human trafficking. We talked about that. We can talk about, you can report your suspicions, right? You all have the card, right? Volunteer and support our anti-trafficking efforts. Work with local religious congregations and communities to develop programs, right? Host awareness events like this, right? Write your local, state, and federal government representatives, right? That's where the real power is. Put pressure on them, and the laws will change, right? Remember I said, the law's 11 years old, all right? Encourage schools to partner with law enforcement, right? And educate students about warning signs. It's a tough conversation to have with your 11, 12-year-old. 2 more minutes and I'll be done, all right? It's a tough conversation to have with your 11, 12-year-old, right? But it's necessary. It is necessary, all right? Create and maintain, support local providers, right? Victims need things: housing, employment, education, they need medical treatment, they need child care. If you take care of those things, it's easier to help victims become survivors and get out of the game, all right? Businesses, if you have businesses, provide internships, job training, job skills, all right? And journalists, right? Journalists play a tremendous role, right? You put the shame game, you put it up on the front of the newspaper, people care, all right? So I am like I began, right? When you look at groups of people, when you look at young kids, what do you see, right? Because I see everything that you see, but I also see sex trafficking victims, or potentials, all right? And ultimately, the end is to stop human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Lieutenant Sharp. I think the audience would agree that it was a depth of knowledge, and I hope we all have the human trafficking hotline number written down. And if not, we can repeat it again. It's 646-610-7272, and it's in your folders. Keep that in mind, because we want to make sure that if we do suspect anything is happening to anyone in your neighborhood, you can report it to the right place. Now I'm going to pass the torch over to Semhar, and she'll help to moderate our panel discussion.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We have such an informed and exciting panel with you today. But before we begin, I just want to thank you, Delta Sigma Theta, for hosting this event.
Yes.
And on behalf of UNICEF and UNICEF USA, we believe that every child deserves a right to a free, safe, and protected life, prosperous and healthy. And we thank you for what you're doing in your community to activate and protect the next generation, our women and girls, our boys and men. And UNICEF USA, the United Nations Children's Fund, works around the world in 190 countries. Usually you think of UNICEF for working in Africa and Asia and the Middle East. But what most people don't know is that UNICEF also has 35 national committees. We're nonprofits around the world, where our charge is to work with the public. So UNICEF USA is the fundraising and advocacy arm for UNICEF, but also to help raise awareness and mobilize Americans to think about the children's needs around the world, including the United States. We were actually at Delta Sigma Theta's National Convention in August, and we'll be there again and again. But on behalf of UNICEF USA, we really appreciate the support that the Deltas have given to UNICEF for over 30 years. And we have offices in 9 cities across the country, so that's just means a lot to us to be here for so many reasons. We have a very exciting panel, and I would like everyone to just take time to get to know what each of them are doing to combat trafficking at the community level. And I'm actually going to start with Detective Chavez, and we're going to move this way. So then
Good afternoon. My name is Detective Chavez. I'm assigned to NYPD Human Trafficking Team, and Lieutenant Sharp is my boss. This is my first time actually on a panel, and I'm a little bit nervous, but I will do my best to answer questions if you have them. I also want to give you my number. If anybody knows someone, or knows someone who knows someone, or even have questions in regards to what's human trafficking, what can I do to help, what should I look for? If you have any questions, I'm gonna give you my number. I'm gonna give you a minute. My number is 646-872-8861. That's my cell phone. You can I'll answer it. If I don't answer it, you can text me, or you have any questions, I'm there. I will get to you. Okay, I handle human trafficking investigations. It goes from labor trafficking to sex trafficking. I handle many sex trafficking cases. And as the days go on, we get more and more and more cases. Thankfully, people are they're learning and then every day. And working together is the best team that we can have to combat human trafficking. I've been a detective since 2001. I've been on the job for 19 years. I love what I do, and how do I engage with survivors of human trafficking? Talking, gaining a rapport, listening, not judging. Well, that's not what we're here for. And the ultimate goal is the survival of the survivor. That's the ultimate goal.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Winters. I'm an assistant district attorney here in Manhattan, and I'm assigned to the Human Trafficking Response Unit. So in that position, I work with not only the human trafficking team, but other units in NYPD in investigating both sex trafficking, promoting prostitution, and labor trafficking cases. I'm also the supervising ADA in the human trafficking intervention part, which is held at Midtown Community Court every Tuesday. And so basically, around the time that the sex trafficking laws came into existence in 2007, DA Vance decided that rather than treating prostitution arrests and people who are arrested for prostitution as defendants, we should be viewing them as victims or survivors. And so this part was created to connect those individuals with services. So essentially what happens, Lieutenant Sharp didn't mention this, but NYPD has really reduced the number of prostitution arrests that they've been making. And very often when individuals are arrested for prostitution, rather than putting them through the system, they're given what's called a desk appearance ticket or a DAT. And so rather than going down to central booking and sitting in jail for 24 hours and then seeing a judge, they're given paperwork and told to come back to court. And when they come back to court, it's to our courtroom in Midtown, where rather than giving someone a criminal record here in New York or adding to their criminal record, we say if you connect with services, if you participate in them for 5 to 10 sessions, then we will dismiss your case when you've completed it. The reason we think that that works is, as the video sort of alluded to, when women are arrested for prostitution, very often their pimps are going to be the one paying their bail, or they're sitting in the audience as they're waiting to be arraigned. And so within hours of being arrested, they're right back with their pimp. Versus if we're connecting them with services, they're going to meet with a counselor, that might be the only hour or 2 hours that they're not immediately in the control of their pimp. And so even if they don't want to cooperate with the DA's office at that time or NYPD, the hope is that they get services for that 1 to 2 hours, they're away from their pimp for that 1 to 2 hours, and that we can make a difference in their lives in some way. And so a lot of times we do have victims who will come back years later. You know, they were arrested and had services. They weren't willing to participate in a prosecution at that time, but they will come back to our office or NYPD later on when they're ready to get out of the life, and they will cooperate with the DA's office.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Reverend Dr. Q English. I'm the president and founder of Not on My Watch. My focus was on, I did my dissertation on sex trafficking, so I'm very passionate about this. Not on My Watch was formed out of over 1,000 concerned individuals. We were holding one of our national conferences, and it came to light that this was happening in our backyard. And we began to meet regularly to think of ways to address this atrocity. And so we now have a training center that's located on 10 Washington Street on the 17th floor in the Battery Park area, where we do extensive training, education, creating advocates, ongoingly, because we really do believe education is power. We just graduated 120 individuals 2 days ago. But it's not just about the certificate, it's about creating advocates. So we advocate around communities, advocate in houses of worship. We do advocacy around policy. We had our first Congressional Roundtable Summit in DC where we were advocating around a bill to see that Backpage.com is penalized for their activity. Right now there is a loophole where they are not penalized or prosecuted with the exception of those that are pimps and or the buyers of sex. So we're trying to enforce tougher laws in prosecuting the facilitators of this atrocity. In addition, we have borough directors that cover all 5 boroughs, including Long Island and Westchester, and their responsibility is to grow the movement by creating more advocates and signing more people up for training and creating awareness. In addition, we hold national conferences. So we're in our 5th national conference this year where we bring together, last conference had several hundred, my largest conference had about 700. And so to date, we've educated over 2,500 about sex trafficking. And lastly, last year, I presented to the mayor and his folks. I also serve on the Clergy Advisory Council, which is what I also created. I told them, I said, you know what, we really need to create an office to combat human trafficking. Because right now we have an office to combat domestic violence, but there's no centralized leadership in the city to address this. And so from there, they allowed me to convene monthly, something is sort of like an office without walls, Traffic Free NYC, where I bring together all of the agencies in the city from ACS, Safe Horizon, Sanctuary for Families, NYPD, FBI, Homeland Security, all of the agencies that have anything to do with sex trafficking. Restore New York City, all of us come together to intentionally strategize on the best ways to address this atrocity. And we've identified as a result 3 top priorities in our city, one being beds. We lack beds in New York City for our trafficking victims. Number 2, intervention and prevention with DOE. So if you're DOE, we really are working hard, and I applaud you guys. 5,000 office, amazing and so needed. Right now, we formed a subcommittee. We're putting together curriculum to present to DOE so they can roll it out in September of this year to the schools citywide. And so we're doing a lot as an agency, and we're excited about it, and we know there's much more to be done. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Fleischer. I'm from Plymouth Church in Brooklyn, and I'm very thankful and grateful that Sharima Abel asked me to be here today. She attended an education event that we did at our church that Lieutenant Sharp presented at. So I'm glad to be here and glad to see him here too. He does a great presentation. So Plymouth Church in Brooklyn. We are an abolitionist church, and what that means is that we were formed in the 1850s specifically to fight slavery as it existed in the United States at that time. Going into the present, we looked around about 5 years ago and we realized that there was a lot going on with slavery in our country today and in our city today. And a decision was made that we wanted to sort out what we could do about it. And so I took on that job, and I've become the chair of our anti-trafficking ministry. We call ourselves the New Abolitionists in recognition that this is a terrible problem that exists today, and we need to do something about it. We can't just look into the past and think that everything's been taken care of. So what we try to do is educate people, both within our congregation and within our community, and then reach out and do service projects with organizations like Sanctuary for Families and Restore and ECPAT. And it's been a really great 5 years. And I have to say, it's been a little bit of an uphill battle because this is a little bit of an icky subject. You can run into people that don't want to hear about something that has to do with sex. But the one thing that I do want to say, when we're talking about human trafficking and sex trafficking, this isn't about sex between loving people. This is about violence. This is about rape. This is about people that are victims and then come out strong survivors, but they are not acting of their own will and their own accord. And so we have to take away the shame, and we have to take away the embarrassment, and we have to talk out loud so that we don't hide in a closet, and we can talk to our mothers about what's going on, and we can talk to our sons about what they should and should not do in their lives.
So following on Lieutenant Sharp's presentation on identifying the signs of someone who's being trafficked, I'd like to ask Reverend English and Beth what they've learned in their organizational capacity in the community. What have you found in training people, training the community, in what the signs look like, and what has the response been like when you sit in rooms like this and you have these conversations? What have you learned from that experience?
Well, basically, they're shocked. They're shocked because, and I think it's because they haven't been educated. It hasn't been something that has been widespread in our city. It's happening, but in drizzles and in little pockets. And one of the things that we found out is that they don't even realize that. Do you know who topped the charts in trafficking? It's our Black and brown. Black and brown. It's like over 100,000 US born children that are subjected to sex trafficking. So when you think about all of these different stats that the lieutenant brought forth, it's heart-wrenching. It makes them want to do more about it, for sure. It raises their antenna. And in part of our training, we tackle lingo. And I remember sitting there, and when we were talking about the different ways they even communicate, I had someone exclaim in the back, "Oh my God," because she realized that there was conversations happening on Facebook that pointed towards sex trafficking. And so education is so important, but what I have to say is that everyone that we train, or the majority of those that we train, have a deep desire to become advocates. In addition, they have a deep desire to create greater protection measures in their own household with their own children.
And I have to say that that's been pretty much the case. What we first found was that there was a fear of discussion, and then there was a lot of inhibition that had to be overcome. Then the thing that I always hear, and I heard this from a very well-traveled documentary filmmaker who does work with the UN actually, and what she said to me at a party when I told her what I was doing, she said, "Oh, but that happens with foreign nationals." And it's like, no. Yes, indeed, there are some foreign nationals that are trafficked in our city, but it's most often our children. And it's most often happening, as people in my church didn't want to hear, right around the corner from us. And we have to realize that this is an evil within our community, and that if we don't act, and if we don't talk, and if we don't recognize it, we can't solve it.
Can I make one more point on that? And in our audience, what we found is that we have those that have been victims of trafficking. Yeah. Now, in our training, we do both trafficking and domestic violence, and there's definitely an overlap in the training, but we find them to be victims of human trafficking. I've had people in my audience who were previously pimps, previously female pimps, okay? And obviously people in our audience such as Kyoka, whose children have been trafficked. So a lot of times they come through the training for personal reasons, and how do I turn this pain into something that can be productive, okay? And so they come to learn, but also to do something about it.
When we receive a complaint, we try to obtain as much information as possible, as far as, do you know the perpetrator, who the perpetrator is? Do you have a name? Do you have a Facebook, social media account, telephone number? All of that helps us investigate what happened, who this person